What's going on, football fans? It's me, J.R. Clark, back again with another Pound for Pound ATL Freestyle Friday edition. I'm going to try something different this off season. I'm going to use Fridays as a time just to talk about whatever topic I feel like at the moment, whatever is on my brain, so to speak. So hopefully y'all will enjoy it. Today, as all y'all know, that we have been talking about the coaching staff, and we're going to dive deeper into that today. So without further ado, let's just get into it. So the press conference is set for Monday at 2 p.m. Raheem Morris will be introduced as the new uh, Falcons head coach. And during this time, Raheem has been assembling his staff with, you know, a lot of excitement, I guess you could say. A lot of some people are skeptical, some people are excited about Raheem Morris. We have talked about it a handful of times during his first tenure as a head coach down in Tampa. He didn't really get much of a say over, his players, over his staff. The Glazers at the time had just bought Manchester United, and they were looking just to go cheap for a little while they recouped some of their money from that transaction. And then obviously here in Atlanta, he was just an interim coach for 11 games. Yeah, I believe, yeah, 11 games. And um, he didn't get to really pick the players, didn't really get to pick the coaches. So this is the first time we're getting to see Raheem Morris assemble the type of coaching staff that he wants. And he is now, or since all that has taken place, he's been here in Atlanta for 6 years. He's been in Washington. He's been out in LA with Sean McVay for the past 3 years, overseeing a good defense out there. Um, Again, not necessarily like his players per se. I mean, you had Aaron Donald. I think this year, you got some more interesting players in Kobe Turner and Byron Young. Don't know if he had a say in those, but it'd be interesting to see what his coaching staff that he puts together is going to look like. So we're getting a lot of names that are rolling in. So let's kind of go through that. We obviously know who the coordinators are going to be at this point. It is Jimmy Lake, former Washington defensive coordinator, defensive back coach, short stint as the head coach. Took 2022 off and spent last year as the assistant head coach under Sean McVay out there in LA. And McVay gives credit to Raheem for bringing them two together. So obviously, him and Lake have really deep ties. We've talked about that. They go way back in Tampa. When Raheem was defensive backs coach, Jimmy Lake was his assistant, and then became the defensive backs coach when Raheem got named head coach. So there's going to be a lot of theme that you're going to see with a lot of these coaches. Raheem Morris is doing a really good job of bringing in people that he's familiar with and that he trusts. So, anyway, moving right along into the OC, we've talked about him, and we're going to continue to talk about him because I think that's one of the main things that got Raheem the job in a sense. Not that it wasn't earned by Raheem, but the idea that you got the best of both worlds. You got a guy with a lot of experience in Raheem, and you got new and upcoming innovation in Zach Robinson. So as the offseason goes on, we'll be talking about and highlighting the scheme that Zach Robinson brings to the table. And then familiar face on the end with Marquise Williams, special teams coordinator the past few years under Arthur Smith. He retains that job with Avery Williams coming back potentially healthy. That's a boon right there because he had Avery Williams um, operating at a pretty high level in the punt return duty, and it'll be interesting to see if he takes over the kick return duty as well. So now we've got that out of the way. Let's get into some of the position coaches because that's starting to roll in now, and there's been some interesting development there. So we're gonna start from left to right, my left, and it might be your right. I'm not 100% sure, but we're gonna start with the guy who is under Jimmy Lake. He's a retention from Arthur Smith hire last year, and that's Jerry Gray. So it's interesting that Jerry Gray was retained with the same title. He'll be Atlanta Falcons assistant head coach and slash defense, right? So, heavily influenced on the defense. Jerry Gray is a defensive defensive back guy. He's a secondary guy. Um, Under his tutelage, Jesse Bates had an all pro career or all pro season. You saw some growth out of DeMarco Helms and Clark Phillips. He had Jeff Okuda playing well up until he got injured. So he's an interesting one that I'm really super glad that they retained. With Jimmy Lake being a first time NFL play caller, having a guy like Jerry Gray, who's been a DC, who has operated tons of experience with the Vikings and the Titans and the Seahawks. And I mean, he's got 26 years of experience in the NFL. So I'm glad to see they were able to, and that Raheem decided to retain him because that's a wealth of knowledge right there. Now, the guy next to him is an interesting one. I like it was early reported that he was going to go to Jacksonville with Ryan Nielsen when Nielsen left for the DC job in Jacksonville, but he is retained with the same title, and that's Dave Huxtable, Atlanta Falcons senior defensive assistant. So, uh, high up defensive coach. He has, before coming to Atlanta, he's been strictly a college guy. Last stint at the University of Alabama. Um, I think he was key in, like he was a mentor of Ryan Nielsen. So the fact that he stayed on here is really interesting, especially stayed on here with the same title. I don't know, maybe he just wasn't offered the same type of situation down there in Jacksonville, but either way, he was retained here, and I think that's going to be a plus. Now, I don't know what this signals as far as the defensive scheme goes. Maybe we'll get some more answers. I'm assuming it's going to be, heavy nickel. Obviously, that's what the league runs. But is it going to be more cover three, or is it going to be more quarters coverage or quarter half type situation? Um, we'll get a little bit more clarity on that depending on what free agents they bring in and who they draft, kind of thing. But it's interesting that they were able to keep Huxtable. I wonder if that's going to help with the defensive front, you know, type of movements. 1 second. Pro tip: before you decide to start recording a video, don't eat some popcorn. That's a bad move. All right, keeping right on moving. The another retainee, and that's Michael Petrie, the running backs coach. He stays on with the same title. Obviously, Raheem felt like he was doing a good job with, rookie Bijan Robinson. Felt like it was important to keep that voice the same as he goes into his second year, also with Tyler Algier. So that's another bonus, and you should see that as a bonus. Also, with Zach Robinson being more of a pass game guy, to keep the run game coach or running backs coach the same should help with this transition. You can see how that, to me, that's a mindful decision on Raheem Morris's part. Um, yeah, it'll be interesting depending on how free agency plays out if they decide to keep Cordell Patterson. Something we'll get into as the offseason continues on. Next on the list was another retention. And I'm glad. Like, this was one of the biggest retentions in my opinion. Okay. And that was Dwayne Ledford, highly coveted offensive line coach. And I think he was under contract, but I think one of the ways they enticed him to come back, so to speak, and enticed him to stick with them and get him on board was they retained him and added run game coordinator. So now he's offensive line coach and run game coordinator. Now, before you think, oh, JR, that's adding a lot to his plate. When he was at Louisville, he was offensive coordinator and offensive line coach. Now, Stutterfield, his head coach, was an offensive guy too. but he helped with those duties. So it was almost like a co-offensive coordinator type deal. And that's kind of the vibe I'm getting here. Not co-offensive coordinator, but um, adding, like, they probably took a look at the style of running that Arthur Smith had. Stylistically, it was favorable to what they were doing out there in Los Angeles with the outside zone. Now, this past year with Kerwin Williams, they got into more pin and pull duos, more power running kind of situation. But Ledford has experience in all that. He's a very good offensive line coach, and I think he will bring valuable knowledge to the run game, especially with Zach Robinson being a first time play caller here in the NFL. I think it's important to have those guys who like a good blend of innovation and experience. And I think that's what you're getting with the retention of Dwayne Ledford. So he was probably, for me, one of the bigger bonuses or boons, however you want to label it. He was one of the bigger ones that got announced. Okay. Right on movement. New addition there from LA. Now he was able to, Raheem brought some guys over from LA, which was, good to see, that he was able again to bring some faces that will bring that type of mentality from the organization uh, out there at LA, the innovation, all that good stuff. So I'm trying to get the name of the next guy up before well, it's going to be anyway. KJ Black is an offensive assistant. That's what he was for the Rams. I think that's what he will initially be for us, is an offensive assistant. But this gives you the possibility of, if in a year or two Zach Robinson, you know, as we talked about before, hopefully gets hired off. Not that you want him to leave, but you want it to be successful enough to where he's getting those interviews, right? Um, so that's the heir apparent in a situation, in this particular situation, is like a KJ Black, offensive assistant. He was he had spent time at FAMU or FAMU as their offensive coordinator, and they went from, let's see, they improved from 232 yards passing a game to almost 300 yards passing a game under KJ Black's tutelage. Um, the passing efficiency went from 128 to 148. So what he does, he works with quarterbacks, right? He was a quarterback. That's what he does. They, he was a pivotal role in getting John Wolford and Bryce Perkins ready last year for the Rams. So another bright up and coming mind who has a lot of experience with young quarterbacks. So if that gives you an idea, maybe if they do decide to go quarterback in the draft, you have some guys who are used to working with young quarterbacks in the building now. So I'm excited about KJ Black. I'll be interested to see like his career progress here in Atlanta. All right, keep right on moving. Another coach that got poached from the Rams, and that's Kevin Kroger, excuse me, tight ends coach. Looks like he will be also coming over with the same title, tight ends coach. He will be tasked with um, helping get Kyle Pitts going in the way that we think he can go, with the talent that he has, um, the talent that he's shown, especially in his rookie season. Try to get him back on track and get him going, which will be interesting. How they decide to use Kyle Pitts, because tight end was not a major feature in the Rams organization, but here you have a potentially Travis Kelsey esque level tight end, George Kittle level esque tight end, talent wise, on your staff. So, or on your roster. So, can you get the best out of him? And that's what KJ Black, not KJ Black, but Kevin Koger is going to be tasked with. All right, here's another retention from last year's staff, another retention, but an elevation or a change of position, and that's TJ Yates. Last year, TJ Yates was, our last couple of years, he'd been our offensive assistant and wide receivers coach. He got promoted to wide receivers coach last year, but this year he gets to be the QB coach, which is awesome because TJ Yates is a quarterback, by trade. He played for the Falcons. He played for a handful of other teams um, during his playing career, but then also coached for the Texans as assistants QB coach during the early years of Deshaun Watson. So again, here's more experience with handling a young quarterback out of college. So TJ Yates gets to apply his trade to the quarterback's room, which I think will be great. In my opinion, there's some people who weren't like too thrilled with the move, but I thought to myself, I thought it was a good move, putting him in the QB's room where that's definitely his strength. All right, next on the list is Ike Hilliard. He's now the wide receivers coach, vacated obviously by moving TJ Yates over to the QB room. Ike Hilliard takes over as the wide receivers coach, and you're like, JR, who is Ike Hilliard? This is why we're doing this video, just to try to give you an overview of who these people are, what their background is. Ike Hilliard was a wide receiver at Tampa Bay when Raheem was coaching there, but he ended his career and joined Raheem up in Washington. So he's been in Washington for a while. Let me anyway, I'm not worried about the years on that, but I know that he was influential in Terry McLaurin's rookie season and his early years. So um, that's a bonus there. Brings some hopefully much needed experience to our wide receiver room with Drake London and whoever else that they may draft, because I truly believe that we're going to be drafting wide receivers. I don't know if it'll be in the first round, but we will be drafting wide receivers in this draft, as I feel like we're going to go back to a lot of 11 personnel, which is, 3 wide receivers. So having a guy like Ike Hilliard who has experience, training up, really good wide receivers, adds more experience to our room, to our coaching staff. Last but not least is Jay Rogers. He is, again, another guy from LA. He is the new defensive line coach. Um, as far as the Twitterverse was concerned, there wasn't like super pumped about Jay Rogers, but he has worked with, obviously Aaron Donald, Khalil Mack. I mean, he's worked with some really good defensive lines. Um, as I alluded to earlier, he worked with Kobe Turner and Brian Young, which both recorded like I think 8 and 9 sacks as rookies. So one of them from the nose tackle position. So that is a I'm never going to discount like what their body of work is, and like I'm just kind of like laying it out there. We still are not 100% sure like what kind of fronts and stuff like that Raheem's going to run, because Raheem has been part of a lot of different staffs and a lot of different schemes and stuff like that. So he gets to now cherry pick what he wants and what he likes to do. Because out there with the Rams, he had to run a Staley slash Fangio style system, and down there in Tampa, when he was head coach there, it was Tampa 2 type deal. And here in Atlanta, it was more of a, the cover 3, Leo type stuff, like Legion of Boom esque stuff from Dan Quinn. So he's been a part of a lot of different systems. Now he gets to put his own foot forward and put his own system in place. So it's going to be very interesting to see what he rolls out. But with the retention of guys like Jerry Gray and Dave Huxtable, I don't expect it to be too far off from what we ran this past season, at least not initially. But we will be digging into that deeper as the season goes along, or as the off season goes along. As I said before, the draft and the free agency period will give us a better idea of what they are going to attempt to do. Well, that's what I got for you on this first edition of Freestyle Friday. I'll be back next Friday with another topic, maybe something schematic, or maybe, who knows? Depends on what breaks during the week. We will be live on Tuesday, me and Jonathan, talking about obviously the press conference that'll be happening the day before. We'll maybe have some more answers, or at least get to hear our coach speak for the first time. As always, folks, we appreciate your support, appreciate you following us. You can follow me on Twitter. I'm at Grim1128. You can follow Jonathan at Jonathan N. Holder. As he says, come by, say hi. And anyway, we appreciate y'all. And as always, Falcons fans, rise up.